Well, I think I told you just out of autopilot, I went to the district office
Oh,
first that
really?
day too. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute.
Seeing no humans there.
The special meeting to order for USD 348. Okay, are we going? Okay, thank you. At this time, may I have an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Phil has moved and Susan has seconded that we approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 6-0. And now I'd like to welcome our guests and invite everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Are there any announcements anybody wants to make? I love it. Take your shot.
Real quickly, just a reminder that this Friday from 3:30 to 5:30, we are having an activity night at the junior high for grades 6 through 8. It's $5 to get in. We'll have concessions and the gym open and all kinds of good stuff going on. So I hope the junior high kids will make it out. That's all I got.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bland. Yes, we are in parent-teacher time, parent-teacher conference time, so I know folks are getting emails about that too. Any other announcements before we move on? Okay, anything? Going. All right. Public comment. We don't have anybody signed up. However, that is available until 7 p.m. So if someone comes, we'll honor our policy, but for now, we'll go ahead and move on with that. Come back to it if we need to. Financial report. First up, or only up, we have a BJHS Chromebook bid. Say that 10 times. Kay's going to talk to us about that. You all received some email information, so we've seen most of this, if not all, already.
Yeah, I believe it's on board docs as well. But basically, we got 2, 4, 6, 8 bids, but the majority of them did not meet the bid specs. And so the low one I brought tonight because the low bidder for both their bids actually submitted one that was if we can buy what's in their warehouse now, and the second one is an alternate for if what's in their warehouse sells. It's about $4,000 higher. So the low bid from Bloom is $26,327.60, and this is for the next year's sixth grade Chromebooks. And typically we'll buy them and they'll last through their 8th grade year. These are the same Chromebooks we've used in the past 2 years. Any questions?
Has the price of those gone up over the last 2 years, or has it been pretty much steady?
So these particular Chromebooks are this is a little lower than the we paid last year. There are 5 less Chromebooks. In general, I'd say the prices probably went up, but these particular Chromebooks will end of life in, I believe, 2027. So that sounds like a long way away, but they quit manufacturing them because you don't want to sell something to someone and then 2 years later have it not quit getting software updates. So these are a bit on sale at the moment because they're going to stop being manufactured. We've been really happy with them as far as their durability. So we picked these particular Chromebooks by watching a lot of teardown videos from a lot of different manufacturers. I'm kind of sad we probably won't be buying them again next year. So we weren't put off by the fact that they won't end of life while we're using them. But they're kind of at a bargain price and turned out to be a little bit hard for anyone. The reason we got so many bids that didn't meet specifications is a lot of people couldn't find them. So we did get 1, 2, I think 3. We actually got 3 bids on that met the specs.
Okay, what happens at the end of their cycle? Do the students get an option to purchase them, or do we trade them in, or what happens?
Yeah, we haven't done that at the junior high. So we've not sold back. So they,
So where do they go when they're done?
we work with e-cycling companies. So in fact, we just finished one just recently. So there'll be someone that comes in and kind of all the things that we're disposing of.
So will the end of life affect what their value is at the end of the cycle?
So we just did one of these. The Chromebooks didn't have any value. There's a big difference in. They took them, but I didn't have one company that offered me any money for them. So I had iPad 1s that we got money for, but to tell you the truth, now that was the HPs. We haven't done that. We haven't been there with the Samsungs, and yeah, it might be something to consider at the end of this cycle. Well, this year, there's another year of HPs, but so anyway. So this particular bid, though, is for the Samsung Chromebook 4s.
Are they giving you daily updates on how many they have left?
She did email this morning and said that they still had them in the warehouse. So they said if this passed tonight, that we would send the PO tonight. So.
Well, thanks I'm glad we had this meeting so we could get it done because, as you mentioned, waiting another 2 weeks until our regular meeting. So thank you for jumping on that and getting that in.
We could have rebid for a different Chromebook. We've watched some different teardown videos, but it's nice to get this one. And we are getting, this is a pretty good price compared to what we would have with about any other Chromebook. So.
And it's below budget.
Yeah, and it's below budget. We were budgeted I believe at 32. Yeah. And this is the Chromebooks, the cases, and the Google licensing.
Awesome. Anybody else have any other questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the Chromebook purchase as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Just so to be sure, we're voting on the 26 figure? Yeah.
So it's been moved that we accept the balloon bid for $26,327.60. Kelly moved and Chris seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your right hand.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Okay, thank you, Kay. You can send your email. Dibs. All right. We now are at the portion of our meeting for bond exploration. It is 6:37, so I don't want to recess until 7 o'clock in case someone comes in with public comment. I don't really want to disrupt our presentation. However, I don't want to make people wait around for 20 minutes. So are you guys just, I was thinking we would recess, but do you guys just want to jump in? Everybody cool with that? Okay. All right. Obviously, if somebody comes, we'll still honor that 7 o'clock sign up, but if not, we'll proceed. I just don't want to mess up our flow, you know. Okay, item 1 under bond exploration. Number 1, bond study findings and conclusions. So what we wanted to do is just really go through this in a sequential manner so that if someone is at home watching and has not been paying attention to any of this until tonight, there's still sort of an overview of our process. We didn't start working on this a couple of weeks ago. This has been actually 11 months plus of work. So I wanted to give kind of a brief overview and recap how we got where we are based on where we started. And it's good for all of us to kind of go through that step too before we transition to the bond committee's recommendations. Before beginning, I do want to thank Phil and Kelly and Mark for the work on the bond subcommittee. There have been a lot of meetings, and we'll talk about that as part of the process later. But in terms of where we are, Mr. Dodge, we started this process before he got here. But we are glad he's here because he's been a huge, huge help. And I say that so that if at any point I miss something or leave something out, Please, fellow committee members, teammates, don't hesitate to jump in and make sure all the blanks are filled in. Last February, the Recreation Commission had gotten in touch with us. If for anyone who doesn't know, the Recreation Commission is structured through the school district. In some municipalities, it's structured through the city. In this town, in this district, it's structured through the school district. As you know, we have many shared and overlapping goals. We serve the same students. They came to us February, officially presented in March, requesting 2, but they would accept 1 for some improvements in the area of accessibility, primarily, along with some other safety features that they identified as part of their own internal study for programming. In that same time frame, we received a financial report that showed us that we had an opportunity potentially to look at leveraging a bond option if we were to study that. All those reports kind of came in an overflowing way, and so we thought, hey, because of that opportunity to leverage a bond potentially holding flat, this is worthy of our time and our study. And so we punted on assigning additional mills to the rec at that time and began making those steps towards figuring out how we would, in a very methodical way, study this. So some of those kind of preliminary things were being put into place. Paramount to that, we were also in the process of finishing our strategic plan. And so we wanted to make sure that we let that process complete itself and to allow the survey results and the data points guide anything that we may then want to do. The results of our strategic plan were very telling in the area of our facilities. Our students were involved in those responses, our parents, community members. We ran that strategic plan study process through Greenbush. And again, it was very clear where we as a board were being asked to do some work in terms of our facilities. So as of July 1, we have a new superintendent. We have the results of our strategic plan that are clearly saying we've got to do some work on our facilities. We have the financial information. We have the prior ask from the rec. And then at that point, all of those pieces start to come together where we say, all right, let's formulate a game plan to really take this on. We hired an architect, did that interview process, and then beginning in the fall, assembled all these different committees for the purposes of gaining even more input and data. That involved a community visioning group, which reflected members of our community, constituents from areas of business, of athletics and activities, music, retired teachers, various stakeholders, folks from industry. That was one group. The second group was a student and staff group. Students from our junior high and high school, in addition to staff that was representative from all the buildings. All of these people, which we thanked them a few meetings ago, and we sent them another email the other day, just thanking them again. But countless hours, I believe, if my notes are right, there were each meeting or each group had 7 meetings, in addition to our operations team and our admin team meeting, culminating in a final meeting altogether where the results from all 3 groups were represented. As a part of that, we identified 3 primary values, and one of those being educational improvements. That came in number 1, which manifested as a CTE addition, career and technology education. The second choice, point of feedback coming from all those groups was some form of stadium complex, either renovation or something new to meet those outdoor needs that have been a struggle logistically to maintain for our district as our programs have grown. With all of the results of all of that, then at that point, the bond subcommittee really wanted to hold all of that into account with the objectives and values that had been brought forward from our strategic plan. As a part of that, safety and security from a subcommittee standpoint was something that we wanted to make sure had a very meaningful role in every piece of this. So those were the three primary areas that we really identified as a consistent thing that we wanted to achieve with this. As we continued through, there've probably been, let's see, our original timeline was to bring a recommendation back to you all in January. We felt it was appropriate, given some changing financial pieces that we weren't expecting with dropping the 5.67 mils, to look at that with a fresh lens, to see in what ways we might be able to make sure that we had studied it even more thoroughly than what we already did. So thank you for your patience in pushing this another month. That's affected everyone. And I also want to thank, before we kind of pivot to the next part of our presentation, I do want to make sure and let everyone know that we have our representatives from DLR Group, from our construction management. Mr. Flowers is here, Ms. Masterson is here, Mr. Kushner, and then we also have Dustin Avey from Piper Sandler. So when we get to the part of discussion, if there are any questions, they are on hand to answer any of those questions. They've been involved in this entire process as we've prepared for tonight. So we've not been operating in some sort of vacuum. We've checked, we've double checked, we've triple checked. And we are excited, no matter what, to bring all of this to you guys tonight. So with that, is there anything else? Am I missing anything in terms of the overview?
I feel like we might have quadruple checked.
We might have even quadruple checked, yes. But that's good. We have an exciting opportunity, and before we get into the actual recommendation and presentation part, I just want to say that every piece of this process, regardless of how this turns out tonight, I feel really, really proud of the work that we have all put into this. I am so proud to be a Bulldog. I am proud of the intentionality behind every single decision, because it's all been about our kids. And when we keep that at the center, I believe that we can do great things. I believe we can lead from a place of confidence and forward thinking and not one of fear. And that makes me pumped. So I really want to sincerely thank everyone again, because it would have been the easiest thing in the world for this board after a pandemic, when we gave 3 mills back, and I'm glad we did that at that time. We've been through a lot together. We've hired a new superintendent. We've completed a strategic plan. We also completed our accreditation process. That's all just been over the last 19 months. Easiest thing in the world to say, you know what? We do have some deferred maintenance. We do have work to do, but we can kick this can to the next group. That would have been completely understandable. But I'm so proud of us that we've done the work so that we can present this tonight. The decisions will go where they will. Either way, we will have been informed by this process. We know where the work is. All the people involved have had their say. And I'm proud of a process that has reflected a very tenacious methodology. It's been welcoming of ideas, and it's been forward-looking. So thank you all for being a part of that. With that, unless anyone has anything they would like to add with the recap, we will go ahead and transition to the number 2 item, which is the bond committee recommendations. So we'll get the presentations loaded there. They're also printed here in your folder. They're also uploaded to board docs, but we're going to walk through all of that sequentially as well.
Yeah, and while she's pulling that up, I wanted to echo what Kelly said. It's been a long process with some overarching kind of driving forces. We talked about mill levy neutral, and that's always been our huge goal. And then also kind of meeting what we hear are the needs from stakeholders and community members, like she alluded to. And we really did narrow. The list. It's probably 60 things. That if you included everything that anybody said, oh, this would be nice to have, or we want, or this is what we need. The list is huge. And so it's really, it's been a long process of trying to whittle that down and get to a point
where we can give people what they want, good quality, what they want, not have to do stuff to try to get everything in there, but to be able to, I use that word, distill this down into something that when we're all done, we're proud of. I'm sure that Andy's got, you got your name on that plaque by that PAC, and I'd be proud of that. That whole process of getting through that and walking into that beautiful facility is great. I mean, you can tell there's a lot of thought that went into that. I wasn't part of the board at that time, but I mean, it's something that nobody looks at that and says, "Oh, why didn't you do this?" I mean, that it's top of the line, and so that's what we want to give. And so, as we kind of go through this, we're going to lay out a couple of different options for what we can do. Kind of some a pre-ramble, if you will. There's no way that we can hit those top three and stay middle levy neutral, right? You just can't. So the first option that we're going to go through is just talking about that as close as we can get to providing those top, distilling it down to just the top three things we can do, and then go down to that middle levy, as close as we can to middle levy neutral.
I pushed it. I think I hit the over button.
Okay, so this was kind of the core three that we talked about. Kelly mentioned the educational improvements. It really kind of boils down to being the CTE improvements. We're going to go through each one of these and kind of see what they include and what goes along with that. The safety and security, one of the kind of issues we've had is if you've been to the high school, anytime there's any kind of significant event, I wanted to take a picture of the last time, I think it was the rest of the day I was there, and it was just like cars up and down the road, people running through the parking lot, people just doing that infinite circle looking for a spot to park, and so that was a big portion of that was the safety and security, and then we talked about enclosing between the two high schools so kids aren't having to go outside. And then number three, there was a lot of passion for this one, the outdoor learning activities site, which is the kind of the restructuring of the athletic complex outside. There was, if you remember back, there was a meeting when we saw there was like 2 fields and this huge thing. That's what everybody at the visioning committee kind of wanted, was this separate soccer, separate football field complex that was just, beautiful. But there's no way that we can do that and complete everything. I couldn't do that even by itself, but even do that and then complete any of these other tasks. So again, the distillation process has been really, it's just been really just sharpening the pencils and whittling it down, until we get to the point where we feel comfortable with being able to give you this as option 1. So next one. So this is kind of just an artist's rendition. I will say none of these plans are, and correct me if I'm wrong, but none of these are like finalized in stone. This is what it's going to be. This is just a conceptual idea of this is what we think we can get for this is what money that we think we need to spend to get it. But, so this would be on the left picture. That's kind of that walkway where it is now between the high school, which is on the right, and the junior high on the left side, which you can't see. But that becomes kind of this big enclosed glass case, beautiful enclosed walkway so that you can get from the junior high to the high school without having to actually leave any of the buildings. The picture on the right has it's like an antechamber. That's some instructional space, lab space, kind of doing stuff before you actually get into the classroom to start doing those CTE educational experiences that this building will provide. So next slide. Okay, so this is just an overview of kind of how that looks. If you're familiar with the bus loop, it does project out into the bus loop. One of the concerns from the junior high administration was for deliveries, being able to still get in there because they take all their deliveries from that west side of the junior high, kind of behind, south of the cafeteria. So that maintains that space open, but we do lose the ability really to have a big loop to turn around. Enough space for delivery trucks to get in there and do their little turnaround, but probably not enough for a bus to do full loops inside there. So you do lose a little bit of that, but you gain then this almost 11,000 square foot facility. So you can kind of see that right now we've got it divided into 3 separate lab spaces. They're all about between 2,500 and 3,000 square feet with that antechamber, for lack of a better term, there in the front. And then open glass, so as kids are walking by between the 2 buildings, you can look in and probably not watch welding, but you could probably walk in and see the culinary arts or the drafting or whatever's going on in there. So there's this kind of oh, that's cool. Maybe I should try that out. Check that Questions about, so that's, I think, the last slide for CTE stuff. Maybe one more down.
Do those,
Yeah.
are we indicating the current path and the current kind of breezeway, and is it not covered there?
Well, it's, so, no, this is like all, I think it's all glass, like glass.
Okay, got it.
And then this is like an outside, kind of like a portico, if you will.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that also lends itself to future expansion on the grass side, in the future as well.
So rather than, I mean, the enclosure between, an enclosed path between the junior high and high school was a non-negotiable. It's just not safe. In the climate we live in today, it's got to be enclosed. So this is a really, 2-for-1 to make the addition and structure encompass.
Solution.
Yes.
And if I'm seeing this right, this looks like potentially 5 running spaces, the hallway running through there, and those 3 on the, I guess on the south side appear to be large enough. They have maybe some garage doors on them, so they could be auto mechanic or welding or nursing or whatever the programs want to kind of build out with.
I think, I don't know that we have those 100% certain what they will be. I think there's a pretty good case to be made for making them at least kind of a commercial culinary kitchen to get out of the little, the home kitchenette kind of look and that we have currently. Moving that in there, that's nice because that frees up some classroom space that then we can utilize also in the high school. So I don't know, I can't say with 100% certainty that for sure one of them will be culinary, but I think that's pretty high on the list of what's going to be in there.
These are big spaces, Jeff.
Yeah,
It's not
just,
just-
3,000.
It's not a 150 square foot classroom. This is a large.
No, it's a little bit fun. I get a little excited thinking about stuff, but it'd be fun. It'd make a lot of sense to put the culinary kitchen right next to the junior high. Because that's right where the cafeteria is in the junior high. So now all of a sudden you have a culinary class making lunches. Or whatever, just fun stuff like that. Think about it.
Phil, I'll add, I think, we really like this. We looked at several different versions of where that CTE building might end up being or how to add on. But with the need and desire to have an enclosed walkway, this was a very efficient way of just making the enclosed walkway ultimately part of this structure and make it a hallway. So it's combining the 2 campuses.
Yes, right.
But also like a hallway of inspiration, so you can see things with all the class changes, the junior high going to the high school. And it's an opportunity to do a little dreaming on your way to class, or maybe see something that interests you that you can observe as you walk by. So,
What level of furnishings and equipment are included in that number?
That's what we have to decide. That's pretty, I think most, again, correct me if I'm wrong, most of our numbers are kind of on the high side, and we will allow that, and then as we whittle down, we can then use those funds elsewhere if we need to, but, I think this is a pretty generous budget for being able to put in there what the higher ed stuff we want.
The soft costs are in each one of these projects, and quote me if I'm wrong, but it's about 20% or so.
20 to 25%.
Okay, yeah, somewhere in there, what that number would
The
be.
CT is 25%.
Exactly.
And that term means all the
That's like the
finishings
finishings and fees and
Equipment,
equipment.
if you have lifts or kitchen equipment.
Or do we want any other questions about that?
Looks great.
all right, next slide.
Okay, so this is kind of what we would call in safety, some safety and security stuff. So it's a pretty dramatic increase in the amount of parking that we have at the high school. Right now, our parking is pretty well maxed out. Like I said, concerts, wrestling tournaments, basketball games, there's no parking left. So that facilitates that. I think what a really nice deal from a safety standpoint is this allows access from North 6th Street and Eisenhower and through, so it adds a new entrance into the school campus off of 6th Street there on the west side. So it will eliminate a ton of congestion at the southeast corner at Eisenhower and, I don't know what the cross is.
Quail.
Eisenhower and Quail, where right now, when you're going to pick up your 6th grader who's not driving yet, that gets to be pretty tough because all the high school students are coming out and coming this way, and that gets all backed up. So with adding the access that you can get into and out of on 6th Street, and then also also another entrance off of Eisenhower, that gives us, that'd be 4 entrances off Eisenhower that we can get out. And again, a kind of a good idea of what's possible, but certainly not a finished plan, or this is what it's going to look like, but it'll accomplish those goals.
Does that become a public road, or that stays on, it's obviously on school property at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it really becomes, I mean, is somebody going to cut through there at some point?
I'm sure they are, I'm just wondering if the city maintains that.
No, that's pretty us.
And I think something also to, it's not on here, but it's part of that vision and dreaming side of things. If we are ever able to reinstate some form of in-town busing and looking for a satellite drop-off pickup point, that provides enough space where you could have that available for a bus to come through and provide that drop-off pickup point. So.
I will say another reason why I'm very excited about this is the access for emergency personnel. That also gives them another way to get in. One of the nights, within the last 6 months, that there were multiple events happening at the school. There were vehicles parked on the grass, jacked up on the curb, and there was a situation where I believe an ambulance had to come. Might have been an injury or something like that, but there were people parked even on the places where it's marked red, don't park here. That's not safe, and you can't even get a larger vehicle around, let alone in. So I think that from a safety standpoint, this helps a lot with that kind of response ability. I didn't mean to make one word there, but the ability for our first responders. There we go.
And we added to the satellite locker rooms for the athletic complex out there, because what we didn't want to have kids doing is in their soccer cleats, trying to cut across the parking lot in their jerseys, at halftime, or coming back out or coming out. So having a facility out there for them to be able to change, to be able to come in at halftime, to kind of, again, be a satellite locker room, to avoid having to do that jaunt.
Currently, girls are oftentimes hiding behind a very sketch porta potty to change clothing at times. I mean, that's not safe from another perspective.
Does this include public restrooms?
There are going to be public, not probably in that building. That's pretty much going to be just like a athletic facility. Whether we have a training table out there, a training room out there, again, varsity locker rooms for changing, that kind of stuff. In the athletic complex, there will be, of course, but that won't be part of it, because that'd be a long way. The other thing we added on this kind of safety and security, it's a little bit of both, because we combined it with the CTE, but is that enclosed walkway, like we've already mentioned.
I'm curious, Kevin, do you know square feet on the locker room or any kind of guess?
Out in that area, I think we're a little over 5,000 square.
Oh, okay.
So you can get a visitor, and a home locker, and some training, and officials, typical official lockers.
And the idea behind it is keeping it away from the concession stand area, is that idea that, when they need to go to halftime or they need to go post-game, they're able to get away from the stands there and get in.
Well, and during one of the visioning exercises, we had these cutout papers that we were using, and one of the things when we got to the budgeting part, it's an example of what Phil mentioned in kind of his opening about, having this long list of things, but yet doing what, I think we all agreed on the fact that whatever we did, we wanted to do well. Like the PAC, we wanted it to not be half done where we got done with it and people are, frustrated or concerned about, why, like this parking lot as an example. I mean, in theory, you could have just put an athletic facility up and made them run across the parking lot to the school to use the locker rooms. And, that just wasn't going to be a safe solution, not only for their physical health, but with the traffic and the parking lots. And, there was no way to really make that happen.
And to be clear, the enclosure between the junior high and the high school is reflected budgetarily in item number 1, but we're just mentioning it here too. So it's not double budgeted for, but it is a safety and security feature, but it is budgeted as part of the CTE renovation, just so everyone's clear about that.
One thing I do appreciate about this plan is that it does preserve the practice fields and kind of concentrates that work along, again, safety and security wise to improve access to both the buildings. But But, I mean, we use those practice fields for basically every fall and spring sport for the most part. And this is nice that we want to, muck up our nice field, so to speak, by practices and keep that pretty pristine for big events.
All right, any questions here now? Okay, so here is the stadium renovation, what we've been calling outdoor learning activities. It really is, when we talked about this early on, had the pictures, do we reorient this field? Do we do a football field and a soccer field? In an ideal world with no budgetary constraints, yes. We reorient, make this, I'll keep this a soccer field and reorient football, make a football stadium. But to do as much as we can, what we're planning on doing is keeping the existing, what's been up to now, the soccer field, making it a multi-sport field. One of the cuts that we've made was, instead of making it turf, was to keep it a natural grass field. That's going to be hard on the field because there's going to be games there almost every single night of the week. Especially if we start doing JV sports there as well. JV football, as we have a freshman football team, varsity soccer, JV soccer, freshman soccer. So that field will be used pretty heavily in the fall. One of the things I'd like to see us do is, if as we get through this, we wind up with a little bit of extra money in that, this would be to transition that to turf. But I'd rather have a natural field than no field. So to try to get that to where we can make that happen. Right now it's slated to be just natural grass. You can see on the left side there on the west end zone, past the west end zone and jumping area, that's the that satellite locker room we talked about. On the south side, the 1,500 grandstand, home side seating area. Underneath that is where you have those concessions, restrooms, making use of that space for all of those amenities that you want to have at the field.
What's Baker's capacity?
Oh, we looked at this on the home side, because that was a good question, because we had that same thing. I want to say there's like 3,000, I want to say?
Between the total
Between the two.
and the extra.
And it was all time, I thought it was more than that.
Maybe the add-on seats.
It was way more than I would have thought
Yeah.
it would have been, just having sat there a bunch. But yeah, so that was 1,500 on the home side, 500 on the away side. Make the visitors do the walk all the way to the other side from the parking lot. Of course, lighting, that's a given. And then, like I said, multi-purpose field. And expanding the 6-lane track that we have currently to regulation 8 lanes so that we can host league and regional type of events that we can't do now. Anyway, we did check, and you can make the track purple.
Does anybody know a number on upgrading the turf?
It's about $1 million.
For what it's worth, we've been talking about that since before
Yeah.
Paul was superintendent here.
Yeah. If there's any way that we can make that happen, I think that's pretty high on our priorities of wants. But I can't, there are there's other things that are more need than want. And again, at the end, if it comes out and if we have money, that's pretty high on our priority list of want to be able to do. Of course, the whole thing's surrounded by, I guess, a 6-foot, 6-foot ornamental fence with one entrance in that's got a ticket booth, so for safety and security and ticketing purposes. So I think that pretty well is another slide for this. Okay, so that pretty well sums up. That would be option 1.
Can I add one?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
We just want to note that there's a designated area for throwing events. You can't see it on this slide, but throwing events would not happen there. Probably if we went back to the wider view with the parking.
It's basically going to, I think,
How do I go?
tend to be playing in the field to the west. You can't, it's not on there.
Yeah, it's not on
Just to
there.
the left of the satellite locker room.
I would involve just clearing some trees and making the paths. That's what it's going to be. So,
Yeah, wouldn't interfere.
yeah. And then you maybe wind up putting a gate on that side too. Yeah.
Oh, so yes.
Ready for the recap?
I think so.
Okay.
So option one, which basically just gets us those top three kind of narrowed down to, and keeps us as close as possible. It's a total budget cost of $19,405. That would require a 0.999 mill levy increase. 0.998, sorry. That was off by 1,000, I guess. I think that gets a good portion of what we want, but certainly not all of it. But in keeping with the spirit of trying to be mill levy neutral and trying to keep that as close to that as we possibly can, that gets us there. And gets us something that we can be proud of, and that is going to dramatically impact everybody at our the secondary level. So, questions about that at all? I mean, like I said, total budgetary cost right there is 19.4. I think our mill levy neutral was 15 and change, so that's about a $4 million increase.
And we will have time for discussion once we get through all of the presentation, so.
Not?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so that's option one, which for operational terms we're calling core 3. Okay?
Okay, so
Here's option 2.
What's that?
Here's option 2.
Oh yeah, option 2. Yeah, what we're calling core 3 plus. This encompasses, the next tier of desires from our community visioning committees of the important things that didn't quite make it into that top tier of priority. So, but it does get a whole bunch more. It does include all of everything that you saw in that core 3, with the addition of what we'll go through. It is a little bit of an increase in mills. Still, I think still in the spirit of keeping mill levy neutral, this basically recaptures the mills that we gave back. That was right before the whole pandemic. So right before the whole pandemic, we had bond mature and was paid off, so we had all these extra mills. In good faith, we gave that back to our constituents with the understanding at the time. I think we had the discussion at the time. Like the time is going to be coming when we're going to ask for this back. But rather than just keep this and make a war chest out of it, we're going to give it back. And so that time is upon us where we're saying, hey, let's ask for it back. So to get the core 3 plus is a 2.998 mil increase that gets us 25 million for doing these things. And it's some really good things that I'm really happy with, and I think are pretty dramatic changes. But the intermediate center parking lot traffic flow solution, if you've been by there at pickup time, I think it's the worst. But I mean, it's a big deal. So we'll do some changes with that. Number 2 was some of the rec centers asks with accessibility, ADA accessibility stuff with where there's gravel and it's hard to get a walker or a wheelchair through there. Also some safety stuff with netting over the top for foul balls. Junior high chairlift, with that sunken floor, it's difficult to get somebody who has accessibility issues down there onto the floor. And also in an emergency type setting, getting somebody who maybe is immobile up those stairs. So that's an option. I think it's pretty similar to what you guys have put in the PAC, Andy, with that chair slide on the side. And we'll kind of go through where that would be. Junior high locker room improvements. There's still some discussion about exactly what that winds up looking like. And then the high school locker room addition. We'll get to that and why addition instead of renovation. Okay, so I think pretty high up there, on wants was a solution for the current pickup situation here. So this is, again, none of this is in concrete, and I think we'll have a civil engineer kind of coming through and coming up with the best possible traffic flow solution. But primarily what we want to do is relieve congestion on bolt up. Different ways to do that, but something along the lines of making 2 lanes of traffic through there, the addition of a separate staff parking lot to the north side, opening up what's currently the bus loop to maybe being a tertiary pickup line, to try to alleviate the congestion on Bull Pup, and that's really kind of exacerbated in the spring when there's baseball games, softball games, and you've got all these away team buses trying to park there at the same time as pickup. So facilitating being able to move those buses off the street, either with some cutouts or some different parking solutions for being able to alleviate that congestion with the being able to take those buses, off the street. So I think that's a pretty significant improvement from what we had.
And the event bus parking, that, again, that's kind of one of those 2-for-1 opportunities, because that's the same area that is in need of being paved in terms of accessibility to the street. That's what's come up over and over. We've got to get this paved. It's gravel. You can't get a wheelchair across that in a very good way, or someone who's injured out. So that part being paved there for that safety aspect of just access, in addition with it then being used to help get buses off the street, so that 2-lane becomes 1 lane very quick when all those events converge at the same time. So it's just another example of where we've really tried to be thoughtful with the experts about how we could solve multiple problems with one answer. So
Yeah, I appreciate this being phrased as a safety and security improvement. I mean, having picked my kids up from this building the last 5 years and looking at 3 more going forward here, it is a daily concern of mine picking up my kids, dropping my kids off. Doesn't matter. Just because there's so much, especially during, like you mentioned, baseball season. It is really packed over there at 3:15.
Got to get there half an hour early just to get in line.
Yeah, you really do. And there's kids walking all over the place, and the staff does a very good job of organizing it as best they can. But it's just a lot of movement that could be. I mean, look at this picture, thinking there are 5 different ways that this improves the situation over there, all of which benefit kids and the families, picking them up quickly and safely.
well, and many of the transportation related responses, I mean, every problem is usually multifaceted. And several of the transportation concerns that were coming up early in the year were not just about, wanting to reinstate in-town busing. It really had to do with the safety concerns of all the things that are happening there. Plus, it's coming right off 56 Highway. I mean, 56 Highway is always just a unique challenge to our community that we always have to be mindful of. And so I think that this provides us a way to increase visibility of children moving through things, because now you have the teacher parking lot on the north side rather than dispersed between the south lot where people are driving through and kids are walking. So there's a lot of thoughtful aspects of that just make normal operations more easy to control, I think, and oversee from a staff standpoint. So
Half is anecdote and half maybe is object lesson. We had a lot of talks about parking when we put together the last bond. And there were a lot of people who said, we don't have enough for sports over there. And in the end, we decided to not spend that extra money and said, well, they're going to have to park up the street. And so I don't know that I regret it, because we did the best we could. But it does speak to trying to think ahead and doing things right when you're doing them.
Well, it's not your fault that our musical theater was so successful that they have to now work down the street and say shows.
are we ready to move to the next slide? Okay.
So this is the baseball/softball complex. And really it's kind of 2 things. It is the removal of all of the gravel that's accessibility issues. For me, I think I've seen somebody with a walker trying to negotiate that gravel, and that's really difficult. I think a wheelchair would be easier, but a walker was really difficult. So it's paving that asphalt on the west side and the south side to improve the accessibility, and then what everybody watching baseball or softball is always listening for the heads up and the tink of the bat and the heads up. And so this, to don't get hit by a foul ball, so this has the protective netting over the top that then allows a foul ball to come down and not hit somebody.
But the protective netting goes up the whole.
Yeah, okay. Basically over that center complex. I mean, it's not quite to first base, on most of them, but yeah, it's that center complex up to includes in concession stand. So having been hit once by a foul ball like that. Yeah. Mad lib. And this was one of the asks, you know, I think this was primarily a rec center ask, is why we include that, because we hadn't really done any of the things that they want us to do. So this was important for us to say, hey, look, we hear you, we acknowledge that this is a need you have, and we're gonna try to fill that.
Well, and the other thing too is, and this is probably more part of discussion, but, you know, when we make these kinds of improvements and we create a safer environment, what we also do is we give our rec commission, and therefore our district, therefore our community, the opportunity to be qualified hosts for, I mean, they're running in so many tournaments over the summer, and that brings so much to our local economy. When all those tournaments come here, you know, the rec center turns around and sponsors this and sponsors that. I mean, again, it all helps everybody. And then those folks are eating down at Homestead or Elk Drum.
That's a good point you make about Dead Luck.
Yes.
Because now you're hosting regionals here, and you have parking enough for everybody, and that is just, I mean, that's.
Right, we're not kicked off the list because we don't have lights and we have to have the game at, you know, it's those kinds of things. It gives those economic opportunities that are not just featuring our school and our kids and giving them those opportunities, but then the impact to the local economy that these kinds of forward-thinking investments
How
provide.
much we can make as a school about medical league parking in the high school parking.
There you go.
Get this bond in no
What's his
time.
spot?
Right?
I'm also just connecting this conversation that we had with the city a couple weeks ago, or a month ago, whatever it was, about how they have that bike trail going along the train tracks there. And this would give them a continuous paved pathway up to our ICO, and but also beyond that as well.
You're right.
I think, you know, looping into that trail too.
Yep. Next slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the chairlift in the junior high varsity basketball facility. So they're on the east side, next to the teacher parking lot. If you come in, it's on that far east side, on the home side, on the exterior wall. And it's like I said, like that chair rail, which you could use to go down there. So again, just facilitating, be able to get somebody who has mobility issues down onto the court. We had a game. There was a game long ago. Somebody had to get carried down there.
Well, this came up at graduation last year.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that, you know, I mean, we should be doing.
Right.
So that's a good spot for it. It's a good solution for that. And again, from a safety and security standpoint, somebody being injured, not able to walk, you know, get them up and out there. I guess.
Also, as it comes to, I mean, you know, fire tornadoes, those are separate things, and maybe sometimes it's quicker to grab people and go, or maybe electricity is not working at that point. But there's all kinds of ways to think about safety other than just your human dignity day to day, and that's important too. The human dignity of I'm going to be able to go down to the floor with everybody else, and I'm going to play dodgeball from my wheelchair, and I can get down there in a way that is dignified for a human being. Plus all the other things. So that was really important that we had this piece in this part too.
All right, so the junior high locker rooms, it is primarily, again, still a little bit of work in progress, but kind of updating some plumbing issues, updating the showering facilities, updating kind of the aesthetic in there, making it maybe not quite as dark and dank.
Well, just making sure that, you know, some of the lighting is a little more updated. Supervision is hard in locker rooms, especially when it comes to PE classes. And so things that we can do to make those spaces safer and sprucing up. We're not looking at Taj Mahal renovations. That's not our idea of sprucing up. But there are some places down there that could certainly use some attention if you haven't been down there recently. That could be healthier if you define safety from that standpoint. That we thought that there's some areas that could be addressed.
Okay, so, we really looked hard at, they're pretty high again on the list. All of these things were second tier. There were a lot of even tertiary, quaternary tier issues, but was again the high school locker rooms. The main problem being, supervision, and then also location. They having to go up and down the stairs if somebody's injured to get down to the training room.
Sorry to interrupt, but in
Yeah.
case everybody doesn't know, all of the locker rooms in the high school are in the basement.
Right.
So,
Yeah, so
Okay.
so it's difficult in a supervisory kind of role that you've got, half your kids are up in the gym, half your kids are still down in the locker room, trying to manage getting back and forth between the two. Supervision down there is, I don't want to say non-existent, but difficult. I think that's a pretty fair assumption. So we really looked hard at doing renovations in there. Trying to change floor plan, change showers from game showers to stall showers, change rooms, add windows, so that you can facilitate that. That still didn't fix the problem of having it be on a separate level, outside of the actual gym. It was going to be pretty costly to do. So as the bond subcommittee said, hey, is there any other options? And one of the other options is, hey, let's continue to use those for maybe the less supervisory intensive things like still varsity sports, the soccer team, the football team, the tennis team can still use that space. So keep it as a locker room space, but eliminate that from being the PE locker room space. And instead, add on the west side, a separate facility that will fulfill a variety of roles. One is PE locker rooms that are very easy to observe, very easy that we can kind of, from scratch, build them in a way that allows supervision and allows them to be close to the high school gym so that there's not this geographical separation from the actual PE class in the locker room. So keep them really close. And then, since we're adding something there, if you've been to a junior high bathroom, you usually try to hold it for as long as, the junior high football game, you try to hold it, not go to the bathroom as long as possible, because one porta potty way over by the tennis courts. So we put in for this some exterior restrooms, event restrooms, and then we talked about maybe giving Gary some space there for an athletic training room. So again, you're not having to go downstairs with your torn ACL to get evaluated, but again, so that's kind of still early in the process, but that would fulfill the role of event bathrooms, PE locker rooms, and so it's a nice solution for not a significant increase in cost over trying to remodel what's existing and still having a lot of those same issues just because of its location.
and the nice thing too with main level, again, is, the accessibility piece for all of our students, and then the proximity decreases the loss of instructional time from the traveling that occurs. In addition to the supervision challenges, I know our staff does their very best, but one person just cannot be in 5 places at once. And the behavioral modification of having that in that space on a main floor solves a lot of other problems or takes away some opportunities, and thoughtful planning can help encourage and the behaviors that we want to cheer kids up to do as well. So
yeah, and keeping the downstairs locker rooms as varsity locker rooms frees up a little bit more space than needs to be able to, to make them PE and get an upstairs training room and those bathrooms.
About how big is this space?
I think it was going to say 5,000.
45.
45.
Okay. So similar to the outbuilding by the football.
and it doesn't mean that space couldn't be purposed as a game day locker. Like we don't want to rule that out, but we did want to make sure to emphasize that we wanted to prioritize it for physical education space that's on the main level, because that has to do with the school day and the curriculum of that class. So that's why we wanted to prioritize that in that way. Okay. And then here's kind of the overview of all of what we just talked about.
Yeah, so all of the Core 3 Plus is an additional just over $5 million.
Phil, I heard you saying a lot. This isn't nailed down, but we're pretty confident this number is inclusive enough.
That's what we've been, yeah.
Yeah, they provided us with several breakdowns for each one. But because there was still some, with the junior high locker room improvements, listen, we don't want to spend 2/3 of that on junior high locker room improvements, so there was part of that we needed to attend to more. And as you will see, the resolution that is corresponding with the option 2 Core 3 Plus, any of these things that can be repurposed, we have security equipment, crisis response equipment, that Kay has done a great job of keeping us informed about. There are some potential opportunities, doesn't mean we'll have it, but we've defined that as part of the larger scope from a legal framework, so that if we are able to capture, that we're able to direct it in that way. Again, we also want to understand as some of that gets drilled down a little further, is there a possibility for turf? Perhaps. But these were kind of the next set of priorities that we felt we should at least get back in front of all of you, and that was the number that they gave us.
I'll chime in on that just a little bit. I think it's a positive, especially on this Core 3 Plus. I think, on the Core 3, we I'd say spent more time and more getting into the detail of that. I think the Core 3 Plus, we wanted to provide some flexibility so that could be, and I think we have a much better opportunity potentially to come out with that want of the turf if we have the Core 3 Plus. If we, I think it's, it'd be a stretch, or it'd be pretty tight, I think, with just the Core 3.
Yeah.
So I think it's a positive to be able to loop all of those additional Core 3 Plus projects without having, put together the detailed plan on each one, so that we're kind of locked into that.
And it would be hard for me personally to sign off on listing turf and not do a chair at the junior high. I mean, that's an old building. That's an accessibility issue. I believe that was priced somewhere around 200, 250. But again, there's, to a certain degree, locker room improvements, there's sort of a range there that we want to be thoughtful about. So we wanted a little more time on some of the breakdown of that. But yes, they felt confident with that number. And here we are there with questions.
Maybe this has been asked, and I'm sorry if it's not be redundant. Remind me why the mill levy would not decrease on Core 3 or Core 3 Plus if we went 25 years? It stays the same?
I can say, if you go to it's the preliminary financing summary on farm exploration item 2. It shows you the breakdown of the mill neutral.
I know, remind me why it doesn't decrease from 20 to 25 years on the Core 3 or the Core 3 Plus.
That would be Dustin. Explain that to us once, but you might touch on it.
I'm sorry.
No, that's actually a really good question. So really the term on those two projects really doesn't dictate an additional increase. So think about the mill levy analysis. We have so much capacity within our existing budget to handle so much of an additional payment because of our budgeting practices over time. So whether we do a 25-year financing versus 20, we only have so much capacity up front. The difference between the two is if we do a longer-term financing, at some point in time, our mill levy can drop once our old bonds are paid off. But we really only have so much capacity to handle an additional payment while keeping the mill levy the same. And going from a 20 to 25 years does not give us any more capacity to add or to lower the mill levy any further.
So as we pivot to number 3, bond election advancement final determination, what I want to make sure is that we have ample time for discussion. And as you look at that agenda item number, there are a number of attachments there. There's the core 3 packet at 19.5. That includes everything that we talked about as we were defining it as core 3, including the resolution language that's related to that. And then underneath that, the 25 million bond packet, as we've been defining as core 3 plus. That includes all of the above with the corresponding resolution language as well. So I make sure everybody's aware that all of that stuff is there for you to consider.
Yeah.
Hey, Kelly, can I make one clarification to the financing plan also?
Yes,
I know
please.
on the screen, it talked about 2.998 and 0.998 is actually 0.9. Okay, 0.9 on the core 3, right? And then 2.9 on the core 3 plus. Just again, minor, but I just want to make sure that's clarified.
Okay.
So follow up on that topic then, because I'm looking at the core 3 option 1, where it's looks like that 0.9 mils is generating 19.5 million in 20 years. And then by adding an additional 2 mils, we're only generating an additional 5 million on that core 1.5, on that option 2. So I guess I'm a little confused about why that first mill seems to be generating almost $20 million, the second one, or the second 2.
Because we're limiting its capacity. We're starting at 15, so.
So the .90 takes us from 15 to 19.5, which is 4.5, and then adding the other will take us up to 25.
That's
So
what
if
you're
we
saying,
did
though.
no mill, we'd be at 15.
Okay.
And that's what we tried to come up with an option for that, but that's where we ran into doing 3 things that weren't complete.
Right.
Or weren't done,
Yeah.
weren't done to what we felt like we would want.
And I will be very honest with you all, 6 months ago, I was already dug in. I'm like, whatever we can do, people have been through a hard time, whatever we can do for flat, that's what I'm probably going to be for, And my thinking really shifted after we went through this process, and not a single group was able to do the 2 most important things without really even focusing on security and safety, which none of it could be achieved at the flat 15 that we were at. So that's why it was such an opportunity that we could leverage that amount of money by holding flat, so that then we thought, well, we've got to do our due diligence by looking at what these options look like to get things done right. Because I think the only thing, people never like to spend money on stuff, but I think Kelly made this point earlier, I think it irritates people more if you spend a lot of money and it's mediocre.
You don't get it right.
Right, and so.
And it's also, we always want to be respectful of the community's tax dollar, but it's not the only resource we're spending. We've just spent an enormous amount of time during studies, and so did our community, contributing to what our needs are. And I think it would be wasteful of those resources to say, okay, but we have to hold flat, and so we can't do 2/3 of them.
What other discussion? And it doesn't have to be linear, just any observations?
I think one thing that has kind of struck me, we were at a wrestling tournament last week anyway, but just the facilities that are around us, when you compare them to ours, ours pale in comparison. And when is the school open borders deal? That happens pretty soon, right? So if you're
school year.
Yeah, so if you're going to be moving to the area to work at the Panasonic plant, you're trying to figure out where to go. Dora just passed their, they got that huge athletic complex and all of their new stuff, and now they just passed the
$39
$39 million bond to do more stuff. Ottawa's got their stuff that they just finished. It's kind of all of just kind of. I was on the way here. I was thinking, it's not just shrink away to nothing. Nobody wants to move here because their CTE is in a little building and they can't play soccer under lights, and that's the important stuff to them, and they can go anywhere they want to go. I think that's why they made a pretty easy decision.
that changes the landscape a lot.
Critical, I think, in our community.
Well, and I think if, thinking back through this whole process, I mean, some of the first numbers that came into our vision committee, I mean, we have an athletic complex that was like 39 million by itself.
Right.
I mean, like Phil was talking about, it was, you know, top notch, 2 stadiums, parking all around it, all this, I mean, and you know, I had a headache during that first meeting because I was like, we're not gonna, we won't even be able to get one. But then when we started rewinding and unpacking it, and we saw that we could actually maybe make it happen along with, you know, the safety and security in the CT space, then it got exciting. I think the one thing that still pains us all a little bit is this, you know, maybe sacrificing the opportunity to have a turf field, you know, because of that budgetary concern. And
Well, one of the
I
questions,
guess we'll lean on our partners if we get there to try to see if we can make it happen somehow.
I think one of the questions I'd asked early on in the visioning committee process about the turf field stuff, I don't think starting out with grass doesn't mean you have to stay grass. You can always come back and do turf.
Can we just do square footage at a time?
Yeah.
Buy a square foot, have your name on it.
So,
Well, there you go, sponsorship opportunities.
well, I was thinking that when you were talking about that, I was like, man, if somebody would like to put their name on that field, you know,
It's an
come visit
opportunity.
with us.
Yeah.
Some places, you know, sell it by the brick. I think
Yeah.
you know, the Lumberyard
Put a
Arts
Union
Center has
Station
the
over
Union
there.
Station, the Lumberyard's done that.
Enzo's done first.
First, I want to thank the 3 of you for the enormous amount of work. I wasn't going anywhere near it this time, so I'm so grateful. And second, I think my own inclination would be to go with the plus plan. And I know it's a bitter pill for some people in our community, and I have spoken to and will speak to those people whose incomes are fixed, and this is really a burden for them, and I always want to be respectful of that. But we were not just elected to look at that point of view, because as you mentioned, if we let our facilities slide to the point where we're not keeping up with people around us, you end up with people not wanting to come to the district, you end up with empty houses, you end up in a stagnating community, and it's our responsibility to help contribute to growth and not let that happen. So it's always a tough balancing act, but I think you guys have done a great job putting together a plan. I would support it.
As you go through the slides, I'm thinking this is all just modernization and improvement in accessibility across every campus, probably except for the PC, I suppose. Which is absolutely fine as it is, right? So I keep doing it from that standpoint of, you know, this helps to correct a lot of the problems that we have, but also sets us a vision for going forward for creating programs that we haven't even fully envisioned on what goes into those CTE spots, right? So I find the option 2, that core 3 plus, to be pretty appealing, and I know it comes at a pretty significant, 20-year price tag. But I'm kind of curious from the committee standpoint, and I'll echo Andy's sentiment too. Thank you guys for serving on all those meetings and consolidating all this information together. But do you have are you in a position to offer up a definitive collective recommendation to us, like how we typically do with that?
I mean, I agree everyone wants to do their own, but I'm in favor of the core 3 plus. I mean, it only makes sense. I mean, we're going to go through this whole process, you know, with an eye towards the future and maybe saving somebody else from having to do this in a few years. You know, and the other thing too, you know, yeah, it's a hefty ask to say we want 2.9 mils, but at the same time, it was just, you know, we gave those back. So that, you know, we're not asking for something we didn't already have that we gave, you know, and we gave it back. And we could have very easily at that time just said, hey, we're not going to give this back. We're just going to keep this. You know, and so in the you know, I don't remember getting a letter saying thanks for the 2.99 mils. I'm sure it was something.
They're in the mail.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to be the only jerk here that does not appreciate the committee.
Yeah. Thank you for my service.
And I also want to just reiterate, y'all know I'm going to bring the whole sense of community and belonging into the picture, but the CTE, I'm crazy about it, nuts about that. And I'm also really impressed with the work that everybody's done on the athletic side of things, and that is just as much that sense of community and can be used in a way that just makes our kids proud, like you said. And if we don't move forward, we're going to be left behind. So I thank you.
I think we were united. I know Kelly will, share her feelings, but like Kelly in the beginning, I think we were all going into this visioning process with the mindset of we've got to try to figure out what we can do for $15 million. And we weren't that far into it, and it was, I think we had anxiety. We were anxious about, what we were seeing and what it was looking like. And I think I'll speak for myself. I have evolved to the point where, if we're going to do something, let's do it right, number one. And we were so close to being able to do all three of these projects, but just not close enough without looking into it. And then, you get into this Core 3 Plus, and we could have a Core 3 Plus Plus and one beyond that. I mean, that's just still kind of prioritizing, I guess, based on the visioning committee, as well as what these two levels would allow. And, I'm excited about it for the community, for our students, most importantly, and the faculty and the people that have to deal with what we're dealing, without right now, So I hope that it helps make us, make and keep us relevant. And I just feel like it's what's in the best interest of our community.
Well, and again, it's we're not voting to say, hey, go spend this money. We're voting to say, hey, what does the community think?
Right.
And so I don't make any apologies about. I'm also aware of fixed income people, but I think the community gets a chance to speak.
Yeah.
I guess what I would add is really just kind of, I want to try to address several things that were shared just a few moments ago. There aren't any specific parts of this plan that reflected the PC. True. However, what we're doing or attempting to do with the Core 3 Plus, with the traffic alleviation, that will positively impact the PC as well. So many parents are in that stage where you're doing the PC IC shuffle. And so
I'm a day every day.
you're living the life, right? And so the ways in which Bullpup becomes a safer place to be will also have a ripple effect on the PC, even though we don't have anything specifically in one of those slides. So there will be ripple effects of that. Just like the roadway, it isn't just about the stadium renovation. The roadway there, again, I've said that earlier, that's going to create a lot safer conditions. That was something that was really, really important to us. The sense of belonging that occurs when you have the safest possible conditions, the best possible opportunities. What we haven't mentioned is, as far as outdoor learning, that doesn't just impact athletes. It also provides a space for people to go outside, and including maybe a marching band. They now have an on-site facility they can practice at. Been very appreciative of being able to use Baker Stadium for all these years, but that's not free. That's money that we spend to lease that every year, that just like anything else goes up and up, and I would prefer to see us invest that into ourselves.
I wonder if Baker would prefer that.
Well, their programs have grown too.
I don't talk to them, but
And we had Baker representatives as a part of our community visioning, and I think, they're like, hey, we've been glad to help, but God love you, it'd be great if you have your own place. I mean, there's no shade on either side with that.
There might be times that allows them to partner with us. I mean,
Right.
There might be a Baker game in our athletic complex someday. I welcome charging now.
But the tens of thousands that we spend in an annual lease is now an expenditure.
35 this year,
Oh.
around 35.
But I think
Around
it was held flat for a long time, but it is starting, to your point, I think it's starting to increase.
Right. And so, that becomes an expenditure that goes away. And so there's a stewardship aspect of that, certainly, as folks have questions about the reasoning behind. But anytime our kids and our students, and I say this as someone with no biological skin in the game, my own children will never see any of this. And I want this for our kids. I want this for our community. despite all the things that are going on right now with these various discussions about public schools are the heartbeat of a community. They're the heartbeat of small town America. And I think at a certain point, you know, we have to make a decision, even when it's hard, to say, okay, we've studied this. We think it's worth putting that forward to the public to have their piece, but at least we can say we've studied it and we want to give people the opportunity, if they so choose and so elect, to invest in not only USD 348, not only Baldwin City community and surrounding, but most importantly, our students who are coming through, and for generations to come. So again, I'll end where I began. That makes me very excited, and my position would also be the Core 3+.
Well, I feel we're very united.
So I'll make a motion then. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 2023-02 for the purpose of calling a bond election and submit an application to the State Board of Education.
Phil has moved and Kelly has seconded to approve resolution number, 2023-02. Before we proceed to the vote, I'm just pulling up that resolution. I'm gonna read. There's nothing in statute that says I have to read the whole thing, correct?
Correct.
But I do want to touch upon it, just because. That way we're all clear. Also, just to give you guys a heads up, we'll do this as a roll call vote. So I'll call for that when we get to that point, because that's part of the paperwork that our clerk has to submit on our behalf, listing the yays and the nays. You don't have to do it with roll call, but I'd prefer just to make her job easier. So it's been moved and seconded with the following resolution. It would be a resolution authorizing and providing for the calling of a bond election in Unified School District number 348, Douglas County, Kansas, Baldwin City, for the purpose of submitting to the qualified electors of the district the question of issuing general obligation bonds of the district, authorizing application to the State Board of Education for the authority to call the bond election and for capital improvement state aid, and for providing for the giving of notice of the bond election. Does anyone have any knowledge of anything more that I even need to read beyond that? That was probably extra. Just wanted to dot every, okay. All right, so it has been moved and seconded. Instead of saying all those in favor, I'll start from left to right, and then you can announce your vote either with yay or nay, okay? Board Member Perry. Board Member Neufeld.
Yay.
Board Member Parks.
Yay.
Board Member Bethel Smith. Yay. Board Member Schiffelbein.
Yay.
Board Member Harvey.
Yay.
The yeas have it, 6-0. As part of that, we will be, there's paperwork that has to be signed that we will take care of. There are rules about publishing, submitting all of that to the proper channels through the county, through the state. All of that's laid out here in your paperwork as well for reference. In terms of the election, that information is also in the resolution. That will be published. It will be in May, on the date of May 16th. And part of that I want to make sure just to kind of note on, there are behavioral things as board members. We've done our work, right? We've done the work. It is now moving to a different place where it becomes an election process. Because Board of Education ideally are not supposed to be political, they're also not supposed to be so in this. So we will not have meetings whereby we are saying, you must vote yes. That's not our role in this process. We've had our ability to speak, our next ability to speak. You can have your conversations about sharing information and all that, but it is not our role to try to convince voters how to respond to the election itself. There's a separate mechanism for that. That's part of what DLR and Lloyd, in terms of their communications teams and all of that, that's what that purpose is for. That's not our role. So I wanted to make sure and point out to that. Also, next steps, Mr. Dodge, if you could
be in charge of just that initial communication district-wide to report the action that the board has taken tonight. That way we are communicating all of that to our community.
Kelly, can you say the vote date again?
Um,
When it will go?
May 16th.
And that's a mail election.
Yes, it will be a mail-in
It's set up as a regular ballot election.
or regular ballot
Yeah.
election, okay.
Yes.
On
So-
May,
So not mail.
So
Regular-
not mail.
Regular
Does that
ballot.
mean no mail-in option,
No, there is a mail-in option if you for advanced voting.
but there's a voting day on May?
Voting day in polling locations. Correct.
on May 16th. Okay, and all of the deadlines for when we have to publish and send and all of that is spelled out, so we'll, the board clerk has a lot to do with that, and we'll make sure all that stuff gets submitted as it is required legally to do so.
Can I clarify on top of what he just asked?
Yeah.
So the mail-in option will be part of the ballot,
So let me just do some clarification. So there's two types of elections. There's a walk-in traditional ballot election, and then there's a strictly mail ballot election. On a mail ballot election, there is no polling places open on May 16th. Voters get the ballot 14 or maybe it's 21 days in advance of the election, and then are required to return it via mail. And that's not what we have set up. We have set up a traditional go to the polls election. However, you can request a ballot by advance voting. You can request a ballot to be mailed to you and returned via mail as well.
the individual voters, and we as a board can
Cannot.
say that we want the mail ballots to go.
At this point, you could decide to do a mail ballot. I think the challenge right now is the county election office is also holding another election in the county for another school district on the same date. And I think there's some interest in having the consistency of a traditional ballot for both school districts at the same time on the same date.
Are the polls open the same, like they are for
They would be, yes.
general primary?
Yes, that's correct.
So does our advisory team have any input on that?
I mean, in terms of whether you.
Which one's gonna be more efficient? I mean, I guess we'd like participation. What would be highest participation from a statistical standpoint?
Really good question. Remind me, has the district ever done a mail ballot election before, do you recall?
I don't believe so.
I would say generally speaking, I think your mail ballot turnout is probably higher. Okay, because again, every registered voter in the school district is getting a ballot mailed to them.
But you can't do both.
You cannot do both, other than if you as Kelly, if you're an individual voter, you could request a ballot to be sent to you and then obviously mail back.
Yeah, typically a mail-in ballot does get more, your raises it up somewhere between 5 and 10%, your numbers. All of the, I would say, all of the Johnson County school districts do mail-in ballots.
I could be correct. I thought that's what we had spoken about before. So
Agreed.
I want to know what the committee had understood and.
My understanding was it was gonna have, it had to be a mail-in ballot, and maybe not because now there's a second election.
Did that change due to the other district recently moving towards a May election as well? I felt like our conversations were mail-in.
Yeah, and they could have been, and we can certainly talk. So it's really, I would say, really it's probably a decision by the county election officer with respect to the election. Honestly, I don't think it would be a big deal if the board said we want to have a mail ballot and doing it on the same exact day. I don't think that's an issue. But I think it would require us to just have a conversation with the county clerk just to make sure that they were comfortable with that approach.
When would that decision, how much time do we have?
Tomorrow. I mean, we could find out tomorrow. What I would suggest is if you prefer the mail ballot approach, we approve the resolution like you just did, assuming the mail ballot. And if it has to be something other than the mail ballot, we would obviously then have to make an adjustment.
Since our district does technically get with Franklin County as well, we'd have to assume coordinate with them.
Your home county coordinates the election. So it'd be it's really not the district's responsibility for that, it'd be the Douglas County clerk's responsibility to coordinate with Franklin County.
And if there were an in-person voting, it's the county that has to staff those.
That's correct. The county electioner has to run the election, just like any other election. Yeah, there's certainly an intent to do mail ballot. I think we move that way, and if we need to change, we certainly can.
That was our understanding because based on prior information, which may have changed and we didn't realize, but to my recollection, by changing from our original January resolution timeline, or making a decision one way or the other, to February, what I thought I was reading was that would mean it would automatically be a mail-in in May. And so if it's not, okay, we've established that. Is there anything in the resolution language of what is here that would prevent that from being the case? That would be.
No. Well, in this resolution, it does dictate the type of election, and it talks about polling places.
Right.
But again, we can basically assume that you're approving it based upon the mail ballot, and it's really just adjusting the language in the resolution you approved.
Well, we've had bad experiences with assuming.
Okay.
So
I would make an amendment, say I would like to amend resolution to also authorize the election via mail ballot.
Kelly?
And do we have the authority to do that without verifying it with the county first?
We would have to, well, you think about this, Kelly.
I was going to say.
Oh,
I could use one.
okay. All right. Hold that thought. We're going to call a short recess.
Yep.
And everybody can
Yep.
ponder. And
Yep, that's fine. Sorry.
No problem.
That's a long minute.
I know, I'm like, wow.
Everybody ready? I want to make sure I give Kay lead time. You're good? Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Thank you for the recess. Where we left off in our discussion was our kind of after the fact, next step type plans. Some items regarding the election. As it is in the resolution, it's spelled out how it's going to be. There's several things to think about. I think we liked the idea of the statistical information that says a mail-in election style promotes more participation. And that's always a great thing in any democracy. At the same time, it's not our custom in this community to do that. And it also would come at an additional cost to the district to provide a strictly mail-in procedure. And that's, I don't know where that money comes from in our current fiscal year. So that's something to think about too. And furthermore, if we were going to go in that direction, it would require an amendment and a fixture to what we just approved. So it would be my recommendation for all those reasons to just let it stand as is, that there's a polling place. People are accustomed to that. That's the culture of our community. And make sure that folks know that an advance ballot option is certainly available. So if there's an accessibility issue there, you're still welcome to do it that way. But that would be my comfort level at this time. Does anyone have just terrible disagreement with that course of action? Okay, then we don't have to change anything that we've done. Megan's like, thank you. Yeah, it's good that we keep our sense of humor about things because, we don't want to get into resolution warfare. That's not what we're here to do. Thank you all for your work on that. And Mr. Dodge, did I say that already? If you could issue some communications on behalf of the board that summarizes the actions that were taken tonight, then we can start sharing that from an informational standpoint, not a code word, you should vote this way standpoint, but in an informational and a transparency standpoint. Here are the plans. Here's what the board approved to advance towards election.
So if I'm reading this correctly, we have to wait for State Board of Education to approve this plan? Is that ever not?
There's an application that goes to the state board if they go through, and there's a set, my understanding of it, Justin probably correct me on this, there's a set amount of money to set aside for bond issues, and you put your application for that.
So a good point, Mark. So to date, there's never been an application denied by the state board. It's really more of a formal process to allow the question to go to voters.
And historically, there's been some matching funds that go with some bond issues, but I mean, that is always.
And that's really part of the application process. Unfortunately, in this case, obviously, we're not eligible for state aid on bonds like we were on prior bond elections. But in the event that the state law does change in future years and it is retroactive, or you do become eligible for capital improvement state aid, this application process would make you eligible to receive it.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, I move we enter into executive session to discuss individual employee matter with Mr. Dodge, Mr. Bland, and Mr. Curry pursuant to the exception for non-elected personnel under COMA. And the open meeting will resume here in the library at, how much time would you all like? Do you want more? Okay, and the open meeting will resume at 8:22. Say aye and raise your right hand. 6-0, motion carries.
Can I get a checklist?
Yeah. Okay. That's it and that's all. So all we need is a motion for adjournment.
Motion for adjournment.
Who wants to second?
Second?
Oh, man, I'm gonna give it to Susan. Okay.
Put on record.
Phil moved and Susan seconded to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned, 8:23.
When do you want to start signing?
Yep, we can.
You're not sending your.
I don't, it's just.